Hello, everybody, and looking forward to talking about feelings and how feelings affect our counseling sessions. And as registered dietitians, what we do with feelings in our counseling sessions, and when do we not deal with feelings in our counseling sessions. So, we've talked all semester about our magical triangle with the base being behavior and other sides being thoughts and feelings. So we've talked about behavior, we've talked about behavior modification, we've talked about how to do that, and we've last week talked about cognitive behavioral therapy and how our thoughts can lead to perceptions that can lead to changes in behaviors and emotions. And today I want to talk about feelings. I want to talk about emotions. And I'm not an expert in this, so I want to let you know again, I'm your guide on the side. And feelings, I'm not a clinical psychologist, so I'm a registered dietitian who's taking psychology classes on her way to her psychology doctorate, but not there yet. So I'm just filling in as best I can. But here we go. When we ask our clients to change their behavior, it can affect us in terms of sadness or excitement and happiness or promise or anxiety. There's a lot of different ways that change can create different emotional states within us. For example, a person who receives a new diagnosis of prediabetes or diabetes type 2 will no longer be able to enjoy, their carbohydrates the way they used to, because now um, there's going to be, maybe a feeling of disappointment or loss. People who are getting treatment for disordered eating, will go through maybe anxiety as they try to change and develop new coping mechanisms and processes for regulation. Or maybe someone who is going is going through bariatric surgery pre-op, who's going through classes and counseling and evaluations, might find that they now feel, you know, a lack of desire to join in with family events and celebrations because of the focus on food. So, just think about the emotions that are wrapped up. And I know as nutritionists, we talk about our macros and micros, and that, nutrition is about fueling the body and preventing disease. But we also understand that there's a lot of, remember, before lips and after lips. And so before lips, the social, psychological, emotional, mental constructs that deal with our eating and our process for choosing the foods that we do. So something to keep in mind, that emotions are powerful and will impact our eating choices. There's a wonderful research in terms of emotions and chronic disease, and one of my favorites is the DAWN study. The DAWN study stands for Diabetes Attitudes, Wishes, and Needs, and it was a pretty big study of both people with type 2 diabetes as well as healthcare professionals. So I loved how they examined both the people who were treating the chronic disease as well as the people who were living with the chronic disease. And what happened is that 85% of the participants, of course, shared that they were very stressed when they were diagnosed. But the fact is that it's ongoing stress, is that the stress doesn't go away, and that their abilities to manage their disease was still being met with chronic anxiety, stress, depression, etc. And I feel that as practitioners, we need to be more mindful of the disease management and the underlying emotions that can support it. I've talked to many of my students who have diagnoses of chronic disease, and they talk about the fact that, even 2, 3, 5, 10 years out, they still get depressed, they still get stressed, they still feel anxious. And, mental health with chronic disease is intertwined and needs to be addressed. As a registered dietitian, we know that emotions can get in the way of our behaviors, and There is overwhelming evidence that our mental health and our physical health are interrelated and linked. And when we are depressed or when we are anxious or when we are not feeling ourselves, our focus on health and especially prevention, maintenance, and treatment can be suffer. And so we need to support our clients in their emotional health because we know that can be contingent upon improved disease management. And even though we might not be psychologists, it's fine. We have a role in identifying potential mental health concerns and referring. So if we find a client who is having difficulty or is struggling or is demonstrating or asking for help, we should have a strong referral network within our organizations or outside of our organizations to support our clients. We can screen, meaning we can help clients with screening for depression or screening for other mental health issues and making appropriate referrals. And then also we can provide evidence-based resources, pamphlets, handouts, blog posts, where we talk about stress and handling disease and where to get help. So, we could do all of these things within the constraints of our practice. And when we talk about emotions, often we talk about the main five and that all emotions are a derivative of MAGS. It's an acronym that stands for the top five emotions, mad, afraid, glad, sad, and shame. And just so you know, there's a wide range of variety within each of these areas. So within MAD, there's a wide range of varying strengths of anger, and we'll see that on our next slide. And, sometimes our clients have a difficulty in identifying how they're feeling. Maybe feelings were not part of, identifying feelings, honoring feelings, exploring feelings, sitting with feelings, figuring out how to handle feelings. Maybe they were not taught these coping skills or these processes within their family unit. So, we might need to help our clients with them in terms of referring them to specialists who can help them become more comfortable and confident and aware of their feelings. Feelings are just, they arise and they pass through our lives like weather, in terms of, you know, weather. And I'm trying to think of an analogy that my psychology professor told us. It was great. It was about temperament and it was about emotions, and that, emotions can be like climate where our temperament is, we're positive or we're more negative, whatever. So we have a temperament, but then we also have daily emotions and emotive processing, and that's like weather. So we have a climate where, this is, like here in California, we're in a Mediterranean climate, but we still get rain. And so you can have a temperament where you're pretty happy-go-lucky, but you can still feel sad. Or you can have a temperament where you're a little more anxious and depressed, but you can still have moments. So, we have to understand that feelings, we don't control them, we don't choose them, we don't stop or start them. They arise and we deal with them and have processes of dealing with them. Now, with thoughts, it's a little different. They arise, but at the same time, we also have a choice. Remember, between stimulus and reaction, we have that responsibility. And then the behaviors we can choose. And so there's some processes of responsibility and action that can be taken. And so understand with feelings, they are what they are, and they provide useful information, and they will leave and go. And again, if it's felt, it's valid. If it's, honored and respected and treated and honored, again, I said that, but, just acknowledged. And sometimes just naming a feeling can be very helpful in allowing them to move on. So here's a graph of how feelings can have different intensities using our MAGs, and how we can see how we have, lower end of the spectrum, higher end of the spectrum. So, if you have a difficulty in noticing and naming feelings, then this could be helpful. And I want to let you know that if emotions are getting in the way of moving forward with changing food behaviors, your client would probably benefit from some help from a psychologist. And, I am one of the biggest, what's the word I'm looking for? Pro Promoters of therapy. I think mental health and therapeutic intervention is just an amazing thing, and not everyone should have access to it and be able to engage in it, because you don't need to wait until you are very, very sick to get help. You should be able to now just, again, it's that, I just love the fact that we want to flourish. And so, even though right now I'm in an okay state, I can work with a mental health professional and get even better. So the thing is that, a lot of times we think mental health, we have to wait until we're really depressed and, we're losing our job or family, et cetera. And that's not at all what mental health intervention is all about. And I think we should intervene sooner than later in our society. And I'm hoping that changes. I think mental health is becoming more of a conversation and is becoming more of a priority. And I think we're appreciating, that small changes can lead up to big results with mental health. And again, a client who, has a difficulty and emotions are getting in the way with being able to handle and change food behaviors would benefit from some mental health intervention. And again, we have skills to help with emotions during our counseling sessions. I remember our reflections. Okay, remember our reflections and our reframing. And again, reflecting allows the client to hear what they're saying from another vantage point. It helps them to connect and build awareness, and it also helps them to encourage resolution. But at the same time, we are not practitioners of psychology, and so we have to be careful about our boundaries. And we are not trained to treat mental health or emotional issues. With that reflection and the discussion and the allowance of emotions, you know, until clients can verbalize how they're feeling, they might not fully know it. So it's good to talk through these things and allow the sacred space, the safe space for clients to feel able to share and explore and notice and name and offer ideas. I mean, it's part of what we do when we build rapport and demonstrate trust and show empathy, is that, we all have emotions and they are valid and honored and, acknowledged. So, we've talked about reflecting, we've practiced reflecting in our labs, and, reflecting can help us to target emotions that might be affecting our food choices. And, you'll want to ask your clients, I'm hearing this. Is this right? Is it correct? I mean, allowing the client to be able to feel and explore and offer. It can be a little messy, and if a client isn't well versed in their feelings or haven't done that, it might be a good time for a referral, because you might want someone who's more trained in psychology and feelings to help them with that. With reflections, you got to be careful, because you don't want to deepen the emotional agenda of your counseling session, meaning you're not there for emotions, you're there for food behaviors. And so the more you talk about emotions and the way people are feeling, the less you're talking about food behaviors and behavioral interventions. So remember, our hallmarks of behavior modification, you know, uh, we don't want to talk about feelings to the point where we're not talking about food behaviors. And we don't want our clients to be emotionally dependent on us. We are not there as we're not there as their emotional sounding board. That's not why we're here, and that's not what we do. And so we want to be careful that our clients aren't disclosing, about their marriage or their relationship status or their economic status or how they're feeling about X, Y, and Z, because, unless it relates to food, it's not our area of expertise. And then again, we don't want to sound like a robot. We don't want to sound weird, and we want to make sure that we're not parroting too much. Reflections, and questions need to be paced properly. And we talked about that. But, if you're saying it sounds like to me too much, your client might get a little annoyed, and that just comes with practice, with progress. And when you're working with emotions, what I like to do, and I think we've talked about this, is that you want to maybe have a conversation about emotions in the beginning as you're getting to know your client and building trust and rapport, and ask about how they want you to handle emotions if emotions come up, because food can have emotional um, integrity. And so you might want to get the process down, like, do you want me to just sit and wait? Do you want me to hand you tissues? Do you want a hug? Do you want me to touch your hand? I mean, like, what do you need? Do you want me to just, what's best for me to respond to you? And, how can I best help you? And you might want to also get additional training and experience in this. So you might want to explore other disciplines to be able to find ways to help clients handle emotions. And although you can't prescribe and treat, psychologically, you can have resources, right? So we can be resource ready and support our clients in that. And where are the edges? Again, there are professional boundaries, and they're not black and white. There's a lot of gray here, and let's talk about it. So coaching, you can do coaching with a bachelor's of science in nutrition science. And this is where we're talking about, nutrition and food behaviors, basic My Plate guidance, etc. When you get into nutrition counseling, you're doing more disease states, you're doing more medical nutrition therapy. So we want to be careful about the fact that between coaching and counseling, there is a difference within an RD and a non-RD. But then also when it comes to psychotherapy, we're talking about trauma, illness, moods, relationships, things that are beyond our food behavior counseling. Okay, so there are boundaries between what a coach can do, a counselor in nutrition can do, and a counselor in psychology. And the reason boundaries are a little wiggly is because, each setting, each organization is going to have different boundaries and expectations, and um, something that you would want to talk to your team about. If you're working with an interdisciplinary team, you'll want to, make sure that you talk to, if you're starting a new job that has a psychologist on staff and you're working in tandem with, doctors and psychologists and other RDs. Where are the boundaries professionally, personally? Where would you like, just so you don't step on toes? I mean, there's nothing worse than people stepping on toes, and so be mindful of that. Also, it depends on the client. So different clients are in different stages of recovery and mental health and awareness. So, where is the client in the spectrum, and where are they in trauma and crisis? And, it just depends on the functioning level of the client, as well as the skill level of the professional. So, your organization, the client, and yourself, how comfortable are you? I'm not that, I kind of get weirded out when clients get too emotional. I get kind of uncomfortable with crying, but I'm getting better. And again, I've put processes in place so that, things up front, we've already talked about it, so that when it happens, I feel more useful and able. And so, these kind of things have helped me. And I've gotten more training on, thoughts and feelings, even though that's not my area of expertise quite yet. But I'm a lot more comfortable the more I know, and the more I know how to support and help. And harm can happen if you overstep your boundaries. You are not allowed as a registered dietitian to treat and to assess and treat psychological disorders. So, you are not allowed to, that's not our area of where you're allowed to, as RDs, to assess and treat nutrition, okay, related issues, but not mental health issues. So understand that we do not assess or treat and mental health and emotional issues. And so we don't know how vulnerable a client is. We don't know, where our client is on the spectrum of mental health. So, leave it to trained professionals to do that. And again, stepping on toes professionally, you might be marginalizing treatment process and protocol by stepping across your boundary. And so understand you could be doing harm to the client and interfering, which is not a good thing. Also, you might be doing things that are not evidence-based, or you might be doing things that are not appropriate based on the assessment and treatment plans, because again, that's not your area of expertise. And, if you play the role of the psychologist in your treatment, your client might delay getting appropriate professional action and treatment. So be very careful about this, but not to the point where you're weird, or, you're what's the word? You're uncomfortable, but just know that if you are crossing the line, you're going to probably know it by, in your sessions, you're talking way too much about emotions. not about food behaviors. Okay. If you're starting to think about your clients way too much and getting too anxious and you're feeling over your head and you're laying in bed thinking about clients and their worries and their problems and their needs, you're probably, if you think you're overstepping, you probably are. So the thing is it's a little bit of intuition, it's a little bit of gut, and again, err on the side of caution, and be sure that you are working with your clients. On my intake form, I ask if they're seeing if they're seeing mental health professionals, and then if you have a response to treatment, to a client's treatment, or if you have comments or criticizing the treatment, and that's not, again, that's not our area of therapy. So if you're worried that you're slipping into a therapist role, you know what? That's a good clue. So again, the gut is the best way to know. Like if I'm starting to kind of worry about a client's mental health and I know that I need to refer or have something to say about referral. And it's just important for us to, again, to stay within our sphere of influence. And these are some ideas of what I say with referrals. If it becomes apparent that our work is stalling because of mental health issues or problems or concerns that, is outside my area of assessment, diagnosis, and treatment, then, you know what, I'll say, hey, I feel like what you're saying is really important, but it's getting in the way, and it's looking like it might be getting in the way of your making um, changes to your foods. Would you like a recommendation to explore this issue with someone? Or, you know, it's outside my scope of influence or my scope of practice. I mean, I have no problem saying that because it's just covering my scope of practice, and it's just assuring that my client is getting the treatment they need. They might have assumptions or preconceived notions about mental health support, and so I can help clean that up. I can help give them strong referrals. And referrals, I have a variety of referrals. I have men and women, I have family, social workers, I have clergy. So in my Rolodex, I have different types of referrals, and I do the best. And I might give one or two names and let them know, just from my past experience with therapy, it's the rapport, it's the trust, it's the empathy, it's building that relationship. And so you might get a therapist that just doesn't click with you, and that's okay. Okay, it's just like, meeting a classmate that doesn't click with you. It's okay. Just go, find another classmate, find another therapist. So I'm not trying to be trite about it, but at the same time, just because you're given a name doesn't mean your client has to go through it. So, you might even want to talk about, therapy and support, the options, and maybe have a handout on that where you can provide more information, that, this is nothing to be ashamed of. And this is nothing, as a matter of fact, it's, I'm hoping that social, you know, thoughts change on mental health, especially after COVID-19 and the pandemic, because I think we're all appreciating how important our mental health is in our functioning and our ability to live fulfilling and promising lives. So again, I'm all about human flourishing, and I believe the emotional and mental aspects are so important and tied in with the behavior. And you can't have a great life without the thoughts and emotions and behaviors all threaded together, working together to, achieve positive outcomes. So, again, I refer when necessary. I stay within my bounds. I use my gut. I work alongside my interdisciplinary team, and I'm savvy enough to know when to refer now through experience and practice, and being very cognizant of those lines. And again, making resources available about mental health as part of my practice, because mental health is an important component to successful behavior change. However, that's not my area of influence or sphere of expertise. Good? Okay. So when we talk about emotions, don't be afraid of them. Work with your client, figure out how you want to handle them if something comes up, because then you'll feel more prepared and you'll be able to address it. You might want to get additional training and experience and understanding if this is something that you're interested in, or if it's something that concerns you. Also, then you can, build your network and start finding people that you like, that you want to work with in terms of psychologists and marriage family therapists and licensed clinical social workers. There's people who are trained to assess, diagnose, and treat mental health, just like we are as RDs able to assess, diagnose, and treat nutrition related diseases. So, respect the profession and respect the mental health profession, and you can't go wrong as long as you ask about the boundaries and stay within your boundaries. And if you're uncomfortable, it's a good a good note that you're probably, if you're uncomfortable, then it's something to think about. Okay, and that you're probably approaching a boundary. Okay, so we have talked about behaviors, we've talked about thoughts, we've talked about emotions now, and so I think you're good to go. I hope this lecture was helpful.